Hello everyone, it's your favorite West Virginia on Space here, and with the new edition of D&D coming out and other RPG-related news, it's sadly started a whole lot of more controversies within the RPG community, which seem to be getting even more frequent every year, it seems. But one of the ones that have returned is the whole discussion of whether the Drow from D&D are racist, which is a whole discussion I want to get into, both why people think this is it in fact the case, and what are the implications of it going forward. Anyway, let's begin. Now, normally what is being said when people say the Drow are racist is that it's racist to have a group that's all evil, that engages in slavery, torture, like raiding parties, horribly matriarchal, and all these other things while having dark skin. So, on the surface, if you don't think about it, that sounds like an open shut case. The Drow are racist, need to be changed, blah, blah, blah. Except for when you actually look at the details or think about it for a few seconds, it doesn't actually hold up to scrutiny very well. First of all, them being quote-unquote dark-skinned. While, yes, they are usually depicted as having darker skin, it's often shaded to purple. And even, it doesn't actually quite work out. Like, I'm sure there's some art that has depicted them as not being purplish, but, like, even then, it's not really a one-to-one with, like, what people think it is or stereotyped as. And that comes back to actually their evil nature, because they aren't evil by nature. At least not in recent books, and by recent I mean the past like 30 years. Because they're actually evil by nurture. They live in a horrible society that teaches them to be evil and will punish them if they do good, so people in that society learn to do evil. If you took a Drow baby and raised them somewhere else, they wouldn't be prone to those kind of behaviors. It's about nurture, not nature. And even within that society that teaches them to be evil, there are rogues that choose to, well, not rogues in the class, but rogues as individuals, but people who break away from it because they want to do good or learn better. Heck, there's literally one of the gods in the pantheon whose basically whole stick is trying to get them to do this. If they were all evil by nature, no amount of convincing from some lady with white hair is going to do that. It just doesn't actually add up. And that comes to another question, actually, is that people say they're racist, but to who exactly? Like, I know that sounds like a weird question, but just hear me out for a second. Like, they'll say they're racist to people of color, but people of color is just a fancy way of saying any racial group that isn't white, which is a super broad group that shares basically nothing in common except for not being white. So it's really difficult to truly manage to, make something that's racist to all those groups of people unless you're focusing on white people specifically. So what culture are they actually racist towards? Now, while I'm sure you can find some obscure group somewhere that practices all the things the Drow do, the truth is you're not going to find that standard anywhere in the world, especially not today. Like, you're not going to find that standard in Africa or Asia or anywhere else. So they aren't actually really a satire of those groups, because simply put, no major group in anywhere does that, or even stereotyped as doing that. The Drow are very much just designed to be an evil, like, basically BDSM kind of group, not based on any real group, or racial group, or culture, or anything. In fact, although it is kind of funny, is that the Drow are actually based on something from culture, but it's not from anywhere there. They're based on Nordic culture, Viking culture, the Norse faith, because that's even where the name Drow comes from, is the Norse mythology. If they're based on anything, they are just straight based on Norse mythology, which is about as far as you can get from those other places in the world people usually say they take inspiration from. Granted, the major culture influence of the Drow is still BDSM, but still. But once again, you take all that into a factor is that the Drow just aren't racist. They're just a fantasy group, really. Sure, you can probably find some obscure work that is racist, but as a whole, the concept isn't. But the real thing that's fascinating to me is how hypocritical when people talk about it is, because there is one group that is much closer to what they say they're complaining against, but the fact that no one acknowledges this shows the hypocrisy going on. I'm actually talking about another type of elf, the Shadowkai, sorry if I can't say that right, from D&D lore. Now, these elves, although are not Drow and not explicitly malevolent, are emotionless, joyless, tends not to like following the rules, and borderline psychopathic, if not just actually psychopathic. Side effect of living in the Shadowfell for literal millennium. And here's the funny thing about that. Unlike the Drow, who their evil is by nurture, they could once again be raised somewhere else and this would never happen, is that the Shadowkai are naturally basically psychopathic. It doesn't matter if you raise them somewhere else or if they chose to do better, they just kind of are psychopathic. And once again, they do some pretty messed up stuff. So why aren't they being called racist or offensive when, they are supposedly everything the people who say the Drow are racist complain about? Well, the truth is actually pretty simple, and at least my theory of why that is, if you will. It's because most people who call the Drow racist either A, don't actually know what the Drow are beyond a very rudimentary idea, and I mean truly rudimentary, probably extending all too old art of them, or two, they're just kind of following what they've been told. I know it sounds like a bold claim to make, but I mean seriously, very few people, if anyone, had a problem with the Drow or the Orcs until someone in a games journalist told them to be. And you can actually see this pretty easily, because if you try to ask these type of people why are they racist, the fancy creatures I mean, they'll say stuff like, oh, it's because they're stereotypically that race, or they meant to represent this insert group of real people. But once again, it comes down to things that if you see a brutish, ugly, monstrous, savage orc and see a black person, it's not the person who made the fantasy thing that is racist. You're the racist. If you see, the Drow and all the evil stuff they do and see, a real, actual ethnic group, then I'm sorry, that's not the people who made the Drow are racist. It's you who saw the evil, rapist, BDSM culture and decided that was some real group of people, not just culture, ethnicity in its entirety, or all people of color. I'm sorry, but that's just... I'm sorry, but that's the actual, racism, or at least bigotry kind of going on there. It's not the people who made the fantasy creatures, it's you who saw the fantasy monster and decided they were real people. And what I think is ironic is that if you actually look at D&D, it's, in many ways, at least, obviously you find some obscure things that were not very cash money, but, the actual message of the actual humans in D&D are surprisingly, just humans, of all races, ethnicities, and all these other things, because humans exist in D&D. I know it sounds like an obvious statement, but, the human group, the human race in D&D is all of humans. All humans. Not just Europeans or Americans or whatever. They are all of humanity. All of our many shades and colors and backgrounds and everything. And I think it's beautiful in some ways that we are all just people. In D&D, humans are just all people. Capable of all the same good and evil. And I find that funny that in a game that mechanically has all people be the same. We are all humans. We are all capable of the same things, great deeds or horrible atrocities, and people instead try to find ways to twist it into being offensive to some real group of people. I find that kind of funny, and in a sad kind of way. I find it funny as a coping mechanism. But overall, I just wanted to kind of explain why the idea that Drow were racist were, incorrect, essentially. I'm not even going to try to defend it. It's an incorrect statement. I know it's kind of like the orc video I did all that way back, but this covers a slightly different issue in a slightly different way and how the argument debate has changed. But overall, that's just my thoughts. I'd love to hear yours in the comments. Like, comment, subscribe, don't dislike, all that jazz down below, and I will see you all next time. Yeah. Hey, why don't you hit that sub button? You're gonna become a subscribble. Get to see my content quicker. Wouldn't that be nice? I bet so.